Let me ask you, Mr. Chacko, let me remind the audience that Roy Chacko is here to represent the ILO Bureau for Employers' Activities. So the first question is temporary work as a stepping stone, and Marie talked about that, to permanent jobs. Is it true? Second question, all temporary workers are seeking permanent job. Is it true? And the third question is, without permanent job, you are in a trap. Is it true?
Okay, the short answer to the first question is that the
no.
Is that the statistics?
Yes. No, I'm joking. The short answer to the first question is yes, not.
No, it's not a yes or no, because you're asking between is it a trap or is it trampoline? And from a statistical perspective, the evidence that is there is indeed, it is a stepping stone to permanent jobs. The transition effect is confirmed. In fact, the ILO, in a paper produced for the meeting that was held earlier this year, which you were at, on non-standard forms of work, found that yearly transitions from non-standard to standard employment can be as high as 55% in Austria, or as low as 3.7% in Italy. In the majority of countries for which data was available, that transition effect was confirmed. But even in the countries where the transition effect was not confirmed, like they gave examples of Germany and Sweden, I went to the research behind that observation and discovered that for Germany, the research referred to says that while the results do not lend empirical support to the stepping stone hypothesis of temporary help services work for unemployed job seekers in Germany, they also do not confirm concerns about potential adverse effects on the future regular employment and unemployment probabilities for these temporary help workers. And I think that is a much more significant observation than how many permanent jobs did you create. Because at the end of the day, it is what are the income opportunities that you offered to the people who were looking for work opportunities. And I'll come back to that in a bit. And of course, there is no automatic or guaranteed transition from temporary work to permanent employment, and you spoke about that. Context is critical, and you'll find different outcomes for people based on age, gender, the sector, and very importantly, labor market flexibility. In countries with high labor market rigidity, transition is more difficult to achieve. But I think the question of how successful temporary work has been in promoting transitions to permanent employment, I wonder whether that's really the right question your industry should be asking yourself. Because it suggests that the value of your industry lies in how many transitions you can achieve. And I would question that assumption. Because I think the value of your industry is not just in those transitions. What you're doing is expanding employment opportunities that wouldn't exist if you didn't do your work. You're also responding to the need for flexibility in a new economic circumstance for companies, because production systems are changing, the environment in which they do business is changing, they need more flexibility, and you are providing that. But coming back to this, the second question you asked about...
all temporary workers are seeking for a permanent job.
There has been research done on that, and I just refer to this Flex Appeal by REC, which shows that in the UK, it is 55% of the workers they questioned said that they were there, in fact, looking for a permanent job. Because they couldn't find a permanent job, they were in the temporary agency work. I found another study for Spain which showed that it was 33%, which means 67% of the respondents were saying that they were not looking, I mean, they didn't give that as a primary reason
So the
for
numbers,
being...
can I repeat? 55 in the UK and 33 in Spain.
Yeah, but just take that as indicative of, even in Spain, that 33% was the biggest contingent.
Yeah.
It was a majority. And but it also shows that 67% were not there primarily looking for permanent jobs. And all these surveys, you got to look into how the question was framed to understand what they meant. But what it meant was that in both cases, there were large numbers who were not looking for permanent jobs. At the same time, you can't dismiss those people who are looking for permanent jobs, because they are usually the biggest number in most surveys. And they have a legitimate desire for stability, predictability, income security, which we need to, which everybody has, and we need to try and meet those needs. And that kind of security and those kinds of benefits, during the 20th century, especially after the Second World War, those kinds of benefits were all generally tied by regulation, practice, to permanent jobs. And that is why you have this large number of people who think that that is the way that they can get employment security, or rather income security, and a certain predictability and a degree of comfort in their lives. So that is how this permanent employment relationship became sort of the gold standard to which people would want to aspire. But that is now a sort of receding market, a receding objective, if that's what you're trying to achieve, putting people into permanent jobs. Because if you look at the statistics, it'll show that the permanent job is becoming a smaller and smaller proportion of the total number of jobs in economies. There is no way you can force employers to produce permanent jobs. They have to make sense to the employers. But at the same time, the employers are also producing offering other kinds of job opportunities, or other income opportunities. And so
look at your cartoon. You can bring it to Zineb.
I'm waiting for mine.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah,
It's
Okay.
nice. Thank you. You had that
This is a
slide
kind
about,
of permanent cartoon.
I know.
I had a slide.
Don't know whether I should be worried. But the thing is, so that assumption has a lot of appeal. And when you talk of perceptions, I think the perceptions are based on that.
Yeah.
And so it's not a question of sort of looking to change those perceptions. People will begin to realize, once they get these other opportunities and start working in other frameworks, and when what you do is provide a trampoline, not just in sort of a one-way trampoline of getting somebody to a permanent job, but a series of jumps to consistent employment opportunities, I think that perception will change.
Can I please ask you the favor to go to the end?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. But the fact is that recently, in the World Employment and Social Outlook that was published a week or two ago, 52% of employees globally are covered by a pension scheme, compared to only 16% of self-employed. People, it says unemployment protection is almost exclusively available to people in standard employment contracts. And what that means is that the regulations are not following the changes in the market. And what we need to do is to change the regulatory environment, to change perceptions. We also need to change mindsets. All that will come when the practices are different, but practices can't change easily if the regulatory environment doesn't change with the market. Then, and the question we need to ask is not how many temporary workers succeeded in transitioning, but rather how many people can be connected to meaningful income opportunities through agencies. And agencies are labor market intermediaries. I mean, I know some of you don't like that, but that is one of the functions you do, which is critical to the labor market. And the world of labor market intermediation is changing all the time. Now you have new entrants into that market, like, for instance, Uber, which in the press is considered to be challenging the the taxi
Everything.
industry. But in fact, what they're doing is connecting people to income opportunities. It's what you do. But they're doing it differently. And as was said yesterday, those kinds of intermediaries are not regulated the same way you are. There is a need for regulation to apply to them as well, so that they too give confidence to people, and that people in transitional work, contingent work, can also ultimately get the sense of security, the sense of protection, the sense of the types of comforts that you also had with the permanent employment relationships of the past, which, as I said, it's a persistent trend in the statistics. They are in decline. The ILO, you asked what the ILO is doing about it. The ILO's got an initiative on the future of work, which includes all these issues. It's part of our preparations for our 100th anniversary in 2019. And we're just starting that work. If you're interested in seeing how we plan to start it, the Director General of the ILO has presented a report to the International Labour Conference, which starts next week. In that, he has made various proposals, but it's a lot of proposals for process rather than ideas as to where this will end. I think he's opened that to everybody. You should also participate. And as Ronnie Goldberg said yesterday, we really look forward to Ciett and your member federations and the companies amongst you who actually do research. I know that one of the biggest data gaps that we have is for developing countries, because most of what we know is from Europe and North America. We don't understand what actually is going on in developing countries, but I know that companies like TeamLease in India produce really interesting reports which give an indication of what's happening in their market. Similarly, we hope that we can get data and analysis from other countries as well. So that's where we're going as the ILO.
Thank you so much. Roy Chacko from India, Anna Biondi from Italy, ILO, International Labour Organization, but she works in the Bureau for Workers' Activities. I read that you had on the last February a meeting of experts on, let me read, non-standard forms of employment. Any follow-up?
Yes.
And don't forget that we have 3 questions.
Absolutely. I have the 3 questions, and thank you so much, first of all, to Anne-Marie and to the colleagues of Ciett for allowing this debate to continue, because actually we often meet also at the ILO. Indeed, as you say, Dario, we think it was a breakthrough meeting, the one that we had in February, with the participation also of Ciett, where there was an agreement among the 3 parties. I don't know if everybody knows that the ILO is the only tripartite agency in the UN system where not only the governments participate, but also employers and workers through their most representative organization. And indeed, I quoted in the little piece that I sent for the conference, the agreement on form of employment should meet the legitimate interest of workers and employers, should not be used to undermine labor rights and decent work, including freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining, equality and non-discrimination, and security of employment. This was a common agreement, and it reverberates in
this is your permanent.
Oh, mamma mia! And I know, no, actually better than what I am. I'm too old.
They
even
suggest
for
you to change the mic. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So,
let me say something also reflecting on what we heard yesterday during the debate. Because yesterday afternoon, for example, there was Christian Vasino of Pirelli that was speaking about recruiting international management, how it's important for a company to open up. Absolutely clear, and in a globalized world, necessary. Mr. Esrain of Ingenus was talking about the insertion of difficult cases, ex-inmates, Saudi women that never got a job before, absolutely critical. But in general, it's like the audience here, are those that are dealing with the mainstream agency work. So you are looking for both white collar, blue collar, so it's like, by all means, these are the situations that are necessary and all necessary, but how do we deal with this? I wanted to say that, I personally, was able to go before even agency work, because I'm that old, I changed 3 countries, I changed 4 jobs, I changed different things. And so I think nobody wants just a job for life unless you really enjoy your job. But going back to what Roy was saying, you need to have that security of income, that decency of work, and that, what we say in the ILO, that social justice for all. So this is why we need to find that regulation for those wage and salary employers that indeed are going down probably in the statistic, as the World Employment and Social Outlook that was quoted by both Anne-Marie and Roy is stating, and I invited indeed also you to read it. But you need to read also the second page, which is that indeed the transformation, as much as you are trying probably here to improve, and the examples I had also from Italy are excellent, but it's like we need to know that this transformation in the world of work has widened the divergence between labor income and productivity, and productivity has grown more than labor income. There is certainly a going down of the middle class. There is less income for wage labor. And the ILO indeed stressed this as a loss in global demands of $3.7 trillion. So we need to make sure that we look also at the global picture, at how much goes to capital, how much goes to labor, how much goes to quality public service through taxation. Mr. Hart this morning was speaking about the Volkswagen case and the agreements. I must say that, honestly, personally, I don't think there is nothing new in concession bargaining. We know that concession bargaining in times of crisis is usually done. In our Northeast, how much it was renegotiated in terms of working time, shifts, and everything. The problem is that up to now, what it was negotiated through concession bargaining to reorganization of work, including temporary work, was reinvested in the real economy. And unfortunately, what we have seen after the crisis of 2008, that has been a financialization of the economy. So we need to bring back money and resources towards the real economy, including, of course, forms of work, which I think we can work together in order to make them decent work. Anne-Marie was mentioning Convention 181 that is dear to Ciett, indeed on the private employment agency. Allow me to link it and to say that this promotion by all means should be done, first of all, with the governance convention of the ILO, that is Convention 122, that speaks about full, productive, and freely chosen. So indeed, by all means, just like it is important that together, also yourself, and I'm sure you are striving to do this, that issue of freely chosen. Because, by all means, we can say that I can enjoy going from one to another, but, just like maybe, if I have a pregnancy and I have afterwards,
it wouldn't be so fun.
Then afterwards I like to have my maternity protection, and I like maybe to go to my job and to get, in the meantime, as Mr. Hart was saying, to have the possibility for the company to look into this and to continue working. But, we need to have this thing. And if we look at Convention 181, that indeed is quoted very often, allow me to quote 3 central articles. One, and I think that Convention 181 was indeed forward-looking at the time that was adopted, was speaking about recruitments across countries. and nothing was done at the time. It was still early. But by all means, what you are doing now, which kind of regulation you are thinking in terms of creating a fair labor market, I think it's an interest for all in a globalized economy. The second one is Article 10, that is adequate machinery and procedure for investigate abuses. And this should be done with the collaboration of workers' organizations. Again, I heard yesterday about ethical codes. Ethical codes are great, are the right direction, but we need to go beyond that. We need to see, it's like which is, the collaboration with labor inspectorates, which is the collaboration indeed through collective agreements. And then I would say the heart of Convention 181, where it says that adequate protection for workers should be done specifically, and allow me to quote all the grounds, which are freedom of association, collective bargaining, minimum wage, working time and other working conditions, social security benefit, training, occupational safety and health, compensation on occupational accident and diseases, protection in case of insolvency, a protection of workers' claims, maternity protection, and parental protections. All of these are, I think, items on which we can work, on which we can discuss how to move. Indeed, to make sure that young people, as it was said yesterday, shouldn't cycle between temporary employment and unemployment, but use, the opportunity for work as a stepping stone. So which kind of labor market institutions are needed to regulate, which kind of mix together with, fundamental rights we need to bring together. Allow me just to say another couple of things. One is linked to, indeed, the labor conference this year. We will adopt the recommendation on formalization of the informal economy. Actually, this theme
when
was...
When you say we, you mean ILO?
ILO.
The ILO, right.
I mean, we hope so, because indeed the conference is sovereign, and, if they decide not to adopt it, but the signs are that we are going to have this new recommendation. Actually, the recommendation is quite interesting, because usually it's workers asking for regulation. This one was proposed by the Organization of Employers. And I think workers also agreed, because, certainly you want to fight something that I heard also yesterday, undeclared work, work that, of course, undercut also the honest employer and also undercut the agency work. So I think that this is a stepping stone, again, in terms of regulation that will create a labor market that is fairer to all. Finally, some work that I would say that we need to do together, Anne-Marie, and I think we are in the right direction. As I said, promotion of 181 together with fundamental rights at work, together with the Governance Convention on Labor Inspection and social dialogue. Addressing all these elements that I mentioned before, may I say, I had a little bit of criticism yesterday of organized employers' organization, of trade unions and governments. They are your friends. They are your friends. You need to work together, and so I think that, it's really necessary. In fact, this morning I heard the invitation to create stronger links. I think don't dismiss, don't have the tendency of dismissing the importance of collective voice, organized collective voice for society, for democratic societies at large. Address the issues of share of labor and share of capital and taxation, including for supporting social security system, new thinking about coverage of collective bargaining agreement, making sure that the real employer, this is a demand also of the trade unions, takes its own responsibility. Sectoral approach, the ILO has had an enormous winning in thinking of the maritime conventions, think about a sectoral approach across the country, training, added value of training. I'm thinking of the recommendation of human resource development of the ILO. We had some scandals recently in Europe about the use of training. You know, it's like be with saying which is the right training, of course, in the dialogue, of course, but let's make sure that this not become, you know, something just, you know, where everybody takes a share, but really moments for workers to get requalification and participate in the discussion of future of work, as both Ronnie yesterday and Roy this morning say. Allow me just to say the 4 areas that the Director General has indicated, as Roy was saying, in the report. One is work and society, the value of work in society. And again, for me, of course, because I work for the ILO, I go always back to our Constitution. When we say labor is not a commodity, please don't use expression like inexpensive workers or whatever it was called yesterday, you know, just like labor or something, you know, just like this, it doesn't do you justice. You know, just like, you know, the sense that we want to have is that here your interlocutors are not only the employers. Your interlocutors are both the employers and the workers that come. And actually, you are doing more for the workers if this virtuous cycle is in place. So I think that this is to be important. Workers always value because, you know, it's like, again, you know, I see a tendency of dismissing blue-collar work as an very important value. You know, it's like manual work. You know, it's like I personally do cross-stitching, so that gives me a lot of pleasure. So, you know, just like there is added value, added decent work in every kind of work that we do. So, indeed, how the work is perceived in society. The second one is decent jobs for all, and, you know, this is what I was saying. And then organization of work and production and governance of work. By all means, we could continue for hours to have this discussion also about, you know, what does it mean, the technological change. I personally think that it doesn't mean that because you have technological changes, immediately, you know, we need also to abolish protections for workers. You know, why so? You know, it's like we can rethink how to bring together in a virtuous cycle, indeed, both work, both the need for industry and capital to thrive, but also for security, for societies at large to thrive through system of social security and through system of quality public services. I think that our experience, especially in Europe, again, it doesn't mean that everything has to be done as in the past. I totally agree. But which is the new way to ensure prosperity and as wide as possible, and to ensure progress. That doesn't mean simply growth as a little number with a plus, but also growth that goes back to, as I say, not only workers and their families, societies at large. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.